So yes, I'm a public interest technologist. I've been doing journalistic and activist security for the last almost a decade, working with OCCRP and Bellingcat among others. And today we're going to talk briefly about what the hacker movement is, how it started, how it ties to activism, because as we're going to touch on, not every hacker is going to be an activist. What is the cyber warfare, and quickly define OSINT, which at this point all of you are probably familiar with, but just to define the terms and touch on the current situation in Ukraine. Speculate just briefly about the future and my opinions on it and what seems to be happening. Quick moment to define what a hacker is. A very common image that pops into our heads is just this. In fact, hackers mostly look like this. This is a pretty fair description. When they congregate, they look a little bit like this. I'm going by examples. I'm going to talk about the definition a little bit in a moment. This is what I would show as a perfect example of a high-achieving hacker. This is Connor, a leader of the OpenBCI project. He's using technology and computers to create the brain-computer interface as an open source project to figure out how to interface between brains and computers and make it available to the wider community. He's basically an open source scientist. This is a very good description of what a modern hacker, and also image of what a modern hacker would look like. They also congregate in nature frequently. This is a very known maker. Maker movement is also part of or adjacent to the hacker movement. This is Lady Ada. She's one of the American makers that are inspiring examples of what the possibilities of a person are. Briefly touching about on history, the origin of the term is from the 50s. It started out in MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology Tech Model Railroad Club, where people were playing with model trains, and they started at some point using computers, early computers at this point, not the computers that take the entire football field, or a room, but smaller computers, PDPs, to control their installations. And that's where the term originated. Hack used to be in the 50s defined as a clever way of modifying something so that it doesn't really fit the system. You're not really changing the entire system, but you're cleverly modifying an element of the system for your intended purpose, to achieve some purpose that is not always elegant. It's a little bit, we would use adjective hackish, but it's a way for you to work around the limitation or solve the problem, which requires an intimate knowledge of the domain and is working for you. Later, one of the communities that also the hacker culture was starting and fostered in was the Homebrew Computer Club, which some of the people who, for example, read about early Silicon Valley culture or about the origins of the company Apple may be familiar with. This is where Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started their company. I'm going to make a footnote that I don't consider Steve Jobs a hacker as much as the steam he gained through his business ventures. Steve Wozniak is a very interesting person and a better example of what a hacker could be. Person tinkering with their own interests and trying to come up with some new ideas and some solutions. Out of that community, there were many legs that spread out of that very loose set of ideals. But free software movement is one of them. A lot of software and hardware that we're using nowadays by using the internet, by using our own devices even, is based on some kind of free software or open source software. More recently, there is an open hardware movement also that aims to create devices that are, the schematics are published and shared and improved in the community openly on the internet. In the interest of time, I'm skipping over some details, but like I'm trying to flag some of the things. From that American community, the message spread. In 1981, Chaos Computer Club in Germany was created, which is right now a very extensive network of places called hackerspaces and of communities that adhere to these ideas, and that's where hackers congregate, basically. In 1984, they started organizing a congress, which is right now the biggest in the world congress or con, basically, that hackers meet at and think around their things, talk about technology, but also politics, also art. This is an image from the Chaos Computer Camp in 2019. This is the outdoor version of the Congress. But yes, we, as a movement, have our own, of course, organizations, but also traditional cons and meetings. And from time to time, in Europe, there is also outdoor events that you can attend even as a journalist or a person who is just interested in the movement. It's I would say I highly recommend it, and it's an interesting experience to know this world a little bit better. And you could maybe confront some of the ideas, some of the media ideas of what a hacker is with something really fun and engaging. Learn something along the way as well. We have our own culture, so we have our own books and dictionaries. The jargon file is a little bit of a political treaty or ideas and values treaty, but also a glossary or a dictionary of different terms that originate from early hacker culture. The jargon file defines a hacker as a person who enjoys exploring the details of programmable systems and stretching their capabilities, as opposed to most users who prefer to learn only the minimum necessary. So here we have a little bit of this distinction of, like, that's, I think the most important part of this distinction is that this is people who are passionate about knowing how something works, and then with power, or with knowledge rather, comes some power and some responsibility. Power to change things and modify things to your liking, and I would argue responsibility to change the world and to help others educate and this is what I'm using as a definition. I would say a hacker is just a skilled person trying to overcome an obstacle, often in highly inefficient, irreproducible at scale, but personally satisfying way. So usually what hackers come up with are not solutions that are easy to commercialize or manufacture. They're just solving a problem in an elegant way that works for them or works for the purpose intended. And here I also a little bit steer away from saying that the hacker needs to be a technological skilled person or a programmer. I would argue that it doesn't. There's many examples of hackers from outside of our domain. One of the ideologues of the free software movement said that about John Cage, about an artist that hacked the idea of a song in an interesting way. There's law hackers that find ways of working with a system that they know intimately, like a law system, and that find, well, holes or other creative solutions in them. It doesn't necessarily have to be malicious. And here also what we can say about the moral judgments. There's this distinction that I really like to talk about. Calling every hacker criminal is a little bit like calling every locksmith a thief. The hacker word originally and within the within the constraints of the hacker culture and communities means something about capacity, about skills, sometimes about sometimes it's a judgment, like a value judgment. You get called a hacker. You don't call yourself a hacker by yourself, but you kind of get raised to that rank. So there is a little bit of that. So in a way, like having a certain set of skills doesn't make you necessarily a bad person or a criminal. You can use these skills for good, as we're gonna see in some of the next slides. But yes, this is a little bit of the misconception that is spread around, and for a few years now, me and my friends are having a little bit of a crusade on this. And there is good words to call criminals. They can be called just criminals. Everyone understands that someone broke into an online system and stole data. Can use these words. We don't have to say that they hacked into, because that's a little bit of a broad term that also includes possibly some positive activities. The same with a hacker. Usually when we use hacker in media, and I'm very well aware of this working with journalists, they have a little bit of tendency to do this, is talking about cyber criminals in this way, which creates a little bit of a confusion of terms, and we have perfectly good words to describe it. Some info about the hacker values. I think one of the primary ones, which dates back to the 50s still, to the Model Train Club, is information wants to be free. It's a very popular term nowadays, but it actually originated 70 years ago, over 70 years ago, I think. This has to do with equal access to information, equal access to knowledge, a little bit of, I would say, like, it's a political statement. We sometimes say that technology is not political, but it very much is, and this is basically a political statement about affirmative action, about getting people access to information and skills that they can use to make their lives better, to solve their problems. As such, skill sharing is also a very important value in the hacker community. And here, I would say informal skill sharing. So academia is not the only place to learn, and learning from each other is of great importance within this movement. Many a time I went to a hackerspace to hang out, meet some friends, drink a beer, and I ended up spending hours on end because someone was really passionate about sharing something that they discovered or wanted to teach me a skill that they just learned. And it's a little bit of a community where if you want, you can benefit immensely from this informal learning. There's also something to say about cred, or like street cred, or respect being based on merit. This is a little bit of like it brushes a little bit of an empty statement, but what I mean here is that hackers don't much care about degrees; they care about achievement. So if you have a skill that you can showcase or brag about or share or teach people, that's much more important than how many years you spend figuring out a problem or what certificates you got for trying to do that. There's a little bit of that. That's why the focus on informal education. This is Hackerspace's wiki, which is a list of. There's a little bit of tips on how to run your own space, but also a map, a database of hackerspaces. And I didn't check, but like from the rough count from this map, I'm seeing that it's like over 500. Wait, oh, it actually says here. On the map it looks less, but on the screenshot I see, yeah, almost 2,500 hackerspaces in the world. What is a hackerspace? It's a place where we congregate, drink beer, share knowledge, and use machines, be it computers, or many hackerspaces also have some form of a heavy workshop, so they're also suitable for programmers, non-technological people. Many a time I worked on an artwork in the hackerspace because many of them have some form of hardware capability. As I already said, informal learning is a strong value. This is a picture from the Krakow Hackerspace. This is an Arduino workshop where people were learning how to program electronics and possibly make robots. This is a Seabase, one of the first hackerspaces in Germany, in Berlin, a code place, and yeah, I think one of the ideas for a hackerspace is let's get our all of our tools together, so that we don't have to spend more money on tools that we lack, so that we can spend pull up and spend more money on a tool that no one else can afford, and by this it is a little bit of a shared means of production area of an idea. It's a place where people learn from each other, but co-sustain it usually by membership fees, sometimes by sponsorships, and they can share both their knowledge, but also their cut break, their skills and tools. This is Warsaw Hackerspace, which I was a co-founder of, and this is this is the main room where people just spend time and sometimes work, sometimes have some fun and get ideas. Independent research, when I was writing the slide, I realized that independent research means something else right now. So I don't mean the YouTube independent research. I meant education outside of academia. I think I'm gonna skip some details because in the interest of time. But how does it tie to activism? One of the offshoots of the hacker movement, when we realized that human rights are important and also on the web, was people who started caring about digital rights and organized around trying to protect digital rights. So of course there is no cohesion here, but most of hackers, and this is according to hacker ideals, are going to be anti-censorship, huge protests, anti-ACTA, all across Europe and in the US around the agreement to censor internet were pushed back on, starting from the hacker communities. The information spread that this is a very bad move. Right to privacy, which I was also involved in for a while, is also a movement of realizing, hey, surveillance exists. Surveillance is very dangerous for an individual, and we cannot have political systems if we are surveilled all the time. So let's do something about this, and let's create strategies and education and tools around tools that can lead to that. Arab Spring, here I'm mentioning, there were groups of hackers that provided internet when it was cut off during the Arab Spring to get people informed, and this is also what is happening currently, where there is blackouts or where there is internet blockades. There's many groups of people who are trying to make internet work and sustain the open flow of information. There is many groups that were involved in the copyright reform movement. The Pirate Bay court case in Sweden was a very loud one, and I think made many people think they come from that community, although the judgment here might be difficult because hackers are varied and some of them are difficult people. But yeah, these kinds of circles started the debate around copyright reform and whether we should still have copyright law that is dated, common law that is dated over 100 years ago and was meant to protect books from being fabricated and from misinformation, which we're battling now, not to keep company interests. A current example, Belarus Cyber Partisans. This is the group of people who are very much in line with the hacker ideals. They're learning from each other, and they're not originally technologists. They're just trying to change the world in their own way, because there is clearly a need right now. They started this group and started learning how to get into systems and how to disable systems, and basically they're doing a little bit of a digital sabotage. They've disabled the at one point they've disabled the Belarusian rail network to prevent the movement of the Russian military. The presentation, I'm gonna link the presentation at the end, and it has links, so all these you can check out later if you want. But yeah, the quote regarding what they do and which I really liked was from the spokesperson of Cyber Partisans. Yes, it's dangerous, but you gotta do what you gotta do. This is like a very pragmatic attitude towards, well, there is a problem, let's solve it. We don't have the skills, but we're gonna learn them. We're gonna congregate here and try to do something about this. And this is like a perfect example for me how it ties to activism. Quickly about cyber warfare, and we'll go for a few minutes to the situation in Ukraine right now. Cyber warfare is offensive activities led in the digital world, so usually involving internet. In all cases involving some digital systems. Usually it's going to be websites or critical infrastructure. They're enabled by technical debt. Many of the systems that we're using right now and are relying for power delivery, water delivery, communication, they're complex, which means that there's many possibilities of something going wrong. And right now we're seeing a little bit of a progression of we're all as a society learning how important these are and how to protect them. And the field of trying to prevent people from abusing these crucial systems is right now a hotbed of innovation. There's many different approaches and strategies that are supposed to protect these. But as I was going to say, it's a little bit of an arms race in terms of critical infrastructure as well. There's always going to be some new way to get into a system, and it's a little bit of a game of two, where cybersecurity specialists are trying to up the game and prevent something bad from happening, and then there is criminals who are trying to abuse the system, or in some cases saboteurs. And I'm not doing ethical judgments here. I'm talking about the mechanics of this. It's a little bit of like, better than something's going to happen and I'm going to react to that. It's a little bit of a work in progress. This process of we don't have a perfect way to. There are strategies that can help, but we don't have a perfect way to protect anything in the digital world. Honestly, doesn't mean that we can do anything about this, but that's like a little bit outside of the scope. Catch me later if you want to talk. A few infrastructure attacks that are famous and that you probably have heard is Stuxnet, the first of its kind malware. It's a beautiful digital spy story if you want to get interested in Stuxnet. This was the malware that attacked Iranian uranium centrifuges. I tried to attack. It was targeted at one specific system on the desert that was enriching uranium for the nuclear program. It's a beautiful spy story of like the investigation into Stuxnet is a fascinating thing if you want to read up. WannaCry and the recent Colonial Pipeline were also forms of infrastructure attack. Both were ransomware. To attack critical infrastructure. And as I've learned making this presentation, I've heard about this before, but what struck me is actually the cyber attacks on Georgia in 2008, before the Russian invasion, were the first of its kind in a way, because they were the first in the world historically cyber attacks that were coordinated with attacks in the other domain. So 3 weeks, I think, before the troops invasion, there was a wave of cyber attacks, and this was the first example of like hybrid cyber warfare, basically, of coordinating traditional methods with the cyber war. If you're interested a little bit about attacking infrastructure, there's a few talks that you could check out from the hacker conferences that I've been talking about. There's experts that were thinking about this and doing this. I think the first one is from 2012, but that the notion of attacking critical infrastructure goes way back, of course. And if you want to see how this works in practice, these are a few presentations to check out. And along the way, we kind of created a zero-day industry, which is companies that sell offensive capabilities to governments, which they claim they vet their clients, but we have many examples of the offensive capabilities being used on journalists or on activists to get people that the state doesn't want to jam with, doesn't like, which is very dangerous. And part of my work was trying to counter that. But I would like to emphasize that, but this is not really in any way, shape, or form connected to the ideals of the hacker movement. They use these words as a marketing thing, but I wouldn't say persons from, well, some of them might be hackers because they might have the skills, but this is very, very far away from the original term. And yeah, and I think we're right now as a society are trying to find ways to deal with these new capabilities and to legislate and try to think about how to protect and how to think about this in this new reality. Always, I think we can define as using open source information, not in the software sense open source, but open source as available on the internet or available to you in digital form, usually information that you can gather and that you can do some reporting or do some research on. This is as we all know here, probably a branch of investigative journalism and a branch of internal research that was enabled by internet. Briefly, a few notes about invasion, and then we're going to move on because I think we're a little bit out of time. In many conversations, I've heard Russia was at the beginning of the invasion just designated as a little bit of an open target. There is no structure. There is no one organization that, of course, opines on this. But I've heard many conversations where their infrastructure, their state and state-owned companies were kind of declared a target to try to subvert and to try to, if we can, sabotage, both for practical purposes and for a little bit of an information and intimidation warfare, right? Because defacing the website doesn't really do damage. It's a little bit more of a form of protest and a form of maybe like psychologically sending a signal, bringing attention to a problem. But yes, like this was the case, which makes you think that many of the attacks on the Russian infrastructure were people from all over and not necessarily the Ukrainian cyber capacity. Early in the conflict, we knew that I think it was Vice Prime Minister that called for forming a volunteer cyber brigade, which like signals that there wasn't much of a capacity in this regard before, but yeah, it doesn't really matter. Attribution in cases of cyber attacks is sometimes really difficult. So on many of these, we don't really know that much about who did them. There were, of course, distributed denial of service attacks, so bringing down websites, both on the Ukrainian and Russian side. There was some evidence of using destructive cyber weapons on Ukrainian systems by the Russian side. Wiper is a form of software that it's a malware, malicious software that attacks the system and tries to, well, wipe it clean. So remove data, make it non-functional and non-available. It's also a link to some reporting about that. There was this group, commercial criminal group that supplies digital offensive capabilities to their clients. And at the beginning of the conflict, they made a statement that if you attack Russian infrastructure, or if you attack the Russian side, we're going to retaliate. We're going to defend. They very quickly, there was some internal disagreement. Not clear if from a contractor or from someone inside the company or some associate. But if you're interested in how this went, Conti leaks is what you should look for. This is basically a trove of information, internal information of that company, that one of the people who disagreed with this political statement published, and this can it can be very visible how these kinds of circles and how these organizations work. As for the Russian capability, it's really unclear what all of it is. We know of many groups that are loosely or more formally connected to the Russian state. Sandworm and Hasiber are one of the popular ones that we know about. Sandworm is the cyber offensive division of the GRU. Hasiber is also a group that is loosely connected with the GRU as far as we know. But there's many different groups and companies, and yeah, it's a little bit of a work in progress of trying to find out what the capabilities are. But yeah, I would say that there's certainly a little bit of an imbalance in capabilities traditionally between the sides here. Quickly about the OSINT angle here. So this was the first conflict where, before the start of the conflict or before the official military activity on the ground in Ukraine, we could tell from the internet. Basically, this is a researcher that mainly focuses on nuclear weapons, but this is what he reported on the 24th in the morning. He was looking with his team before on some satellite images of the area, being interested, and at some point, just before the invasion on the ground, he noticed a traffic jam on Google Maps. This is how we've learned, before any official news releases, that the Ukrainian invasion, Russian invasion in Ukraine is a thing, and it's right now, it's happening. So this is what an example of what open source capabilities give us in the current wage, and this is like the first conflict where we're so connected and have so much insight because of these technologies into how the conflict works. There's better people than me to talk about this in detail, but yeah, a few examples. We have some insight into communication security. Communication security on the Russian side is really bad. So we have some insight into internal communication of the military, for example, for the first time in. Well, I haven't heard about listening to military radios that much during a conflict like this before this. I'm sure there's cases, like there's of course cases of trying to listen in on police radios for decades, but this is the first conflict where it's just like so badly secured that we almost have a full view of it. OSINT also enables reporting of human rights abuses. As I think there's a talk tomorrow about the open source capabilities by Bellingcat. If you want to learn more about the reporting and documentation of civilian casualties, there's going to be a thing. But yeah, the Bellingcat, which I was loosely connected to, did a project where they were working on archiving and documenting the abuses based on open source materials, so based on what people submitted on social media, and trying to verify and document this. So this also gives us an insight of onto the humanitarian side of things, and yeah, how this conflict works from non-military side. We rely a lot on user-generated content on reports of civilians instead of traditionally on the news outlets. Here, like a little bit of a warning. Some of these are propaganda. Some of these are misinformation. I would invite anyone who wants to get involved in trying to understand this conflict to do their research very thoroughly and to try to verify the data as much as possible, because there are many examples of this information where this is potentially life and death. So a little bit of a flag here. If you're doing something around Ukraine and you see information online, either make sure that you know the source and you trust the source, or try to do your own verification, because yeah, as we all know, it's a serious matter, grave matters. Very briefly, future. As I already said, cybersecurity is not a simple problem to solve. There's no one-way solution, one-time solution for it. No cream or panacea. It's a process, and this is not going to stop. This is going to keep happening, and we're, as a society, trying to protect ourselves. And I think the hacker movement, but also a lot of companies that work on cybersecurity on this is the hotbed of innovation here, on strategies how to make our systems that we rely on, both hardware, software, personal, and infrastructure and public, more secure. There's much more to talk about here, but one of my recent realizations is we tend to think about, oh, this is internet, there's no borders. Whatever happens in cybersecurity is kind of on a planetary level. So this is a little bit of an insight from recently. Some of the states are actually creating a favorable legal and political situation for cyber criminals. So as I'm aware, Russia, I think China and Iran have declared that if you're a cyber criminal, you can come, and as long as you don't attack us, we're fine. We're best buds. If you want to come to Russia, just don't attack Russia. But you can ransomware people and earn your Bitcoin illegally by being an asshole. It's not going to be illegal. We're not going to lock you up, basically, which changes the dynamic a little bit. So this only emphasizes that we need some international cooperation and international working this out on, as I said, a little bit of a planetary level. Cyber warfare regulation, we need it. At this point, I don't think there is a solid there's a good handle on what cyber warfare means and what cyber warfare is or isn't. Basically, anyone can by their opinion and by their judgments, call any offensive action on the internet a cyber war. I've heard of it was reported. I didn't just hear of it, but it's very popular to call DDoS attacks cyber warfare, which I would argue it's more of a form of civil protest. But any offensive thing on the internet without enough understanding can be called a cyber war or war on the internet. That's not exactly true, and I think we're still learning and trying to figure out what is attacking a website or attacking critical infrastructure of another country declaring war, and does it necessitate retaliation on the ground or in other ways? This is a little bit of a murky thing right now. Certainly, there is no legislation, and we're, I think, working out a consensus as a planet on what this actually means. Thank you.